up your YouTube, search for Stukeley Meadows, watch on your big screen. Get yourself comfy, this could take a while, what a happy scene. Something new every day for your long-term memory. This is so exciting, it is nearly time for a Stukeley assembly.
Good morning everyone and welcome to today's Values Assembly. Let's kick it off with reminding ourselves of our Stukeley values. So, for each other we, every day we, to improve we, and together we will. Our Stukeley focuses are, and our Stukeley motto is, our Stukeley curriculum is, and 4 words that make the magic happen. Now, I was going to kick off assembly with saying, can you guess where I am? But it's probably pretty obvious. I'm in the assistant head's office. But what is perhaps less obvious is it's taken me the last few weeks to realise that when I film this assembly on a Monday morning, I'm the only one in the assistant head's office. So why I've been headed outside, hanging on to papers in windy weather and things in the treehouse and other locations that I found myself, I could have used the office. So now the weather's getting a bit colder, I am going to try and film from here. But that's not to say that somebody won't appear in that window at some point looking out and wondering what I'm up to. So we'll just see if that happens during the assembly, everybody. So if you've been keeping up with our values assembly so far, we've been thinking about our values. We've talked about care. And last week we talked about create, and I haven't forgotten about your creative ideas for playground games. All of those are sat on my desk. I just need to go through them and then I'll let you know what's going to happen next. You might then expect that today's assembly would be on compete, but that is where you are wrong because we're having a little bit of a switch up. And instead this week's going to be our focus on collaboration and collaborate. Now that's because this is Stukeley Safety Week, which you may or may not be aware of. And you might have guessed that safety is something that concerns all of us. So it is something we have to work on together. And the word collaboration or collaborate means to work with others to achieve something. And in this case, it's about keeping everybody safe. So collaborate is the theme of this assembly. But I wonder, when we think about safety, what you think of, what words spring to mind when you think about safety? What does that make you think of? So I'm going to ask teachers to pause me for about 1 minute and for everyone to kind of have a shared think together and to suggest some words and phrases that you think of when you think about safety. And perhaps that's something that teachers can mark down or write down onto whiteboards. And then things that you could perhaps come back to as a class when you get an opportunity. So teachers, put me on pause, 1 minute. Okay, welcome back everybody. So I hope you came up with some good ideas and have given you some good topics of discussion for the rest of the week. But when I was thinking about safety, I kind of think about words like protect and to keep from harm or to keep from danger. That's really what we think about when we think about safety, things how we can protect and keep from harm. Now, I think that safety can be divided up in terms of what we think about as a school. I think it can be divided up into parts. So the first part that we're going to think about is about personal safety, about looking after ourselves. Now, I was thinking, well, what does that mean when you're at school or for a child in a school like ours? We might think about, or we should think about, crossing roads safely, for example. There's a road outside our school. We have to cross it all the time. Thankfully, there's a lollipop lady to help us. But when we're crossing roads without a lollipop lady, we should remember that we've got to look both ways. We need to check very carefully before we cross the road. And that's really sensible advice. So there are lots that you can look at online with a grown-up about road safety. Really, really important. We might also think about, well, if we were in a shop, let's say a Tesco or a big supermarket, and you got lost. What should you do? How could you make sure that you were safe? Well, you might think about all the safe people that you could go to. So if you saw somebody who was wearing the uniform of that shop, they would probably be a safe person to go to and let them know that you were lost. Or if you were in Huntingdon or something in town and you got lost, then perhaps look for one of those kind of Huntingdon Rangers dressed in red, or a policeman or a policewoman, for example. There are certain safe adults that we know we can go to if we are in trouble or we need help when our own adults, like mums or dads, perhaps aren't around. It also made me think about how you can keep yourselves safe in terms of our school gates. Now, lots of you, especially you older ones, are perhaps coming out of our school gates and kind of walking around on your own and maybe meeting your grown-up at another point because they're picking up, say, a younger brother or a younger sister. And some of you are just old enough to go home on your own. But those of you, even the younger ones, that are kind of walking up to a gate to find your adult, if you got outside of your gate or you got to the location where you were expecting to meet with your grown-up and they weren't there, the best thing you can do is just to come back into school, because you know that's a safe place and there are always adults there to keep you safe. Even if the gate you'd gone out has closed, you could then walk round and come in another school gate, because the adults who are in school are always safe for you. So do remember that as you go out of school gates. Never just go for a wander. Our families might also have told us, especially older ones again that are maybe out a bit more without mums or dads to look after them. You may also have had a conversation with families about not talking to strangers. And adults that might approach you. Now, most people that we meet, thankfully, are safe and they're helpful and they're kind and all of those things. But when we don't know people, we don't know for sure that that's the case. So the safest thing we can do is to is not to stop and talk, okay, to people that we don't know. It's not being rude, it is being safe, and that's a really good thing to remember. We might also know, in terms of personal safety, that if there was an emergency in our house and there wasn't an adult who was able to contact the emergency services, maybe it was the adult that needed help, then you will phone 999. They might ask you what your address is, unless you're using a mobile, and they can track you that way. So if you don't know your home address, it's probably a really good idea to ask your grown-up to help you learn it. It might be something that will come in really useful in an emergency. So we've talked, therefore, a lot of information and stuff certainly for you to talk about at home and as a class about keeping yourself safe on a personal level. The other thing that we talk about in terms of safety is keeping ourselves safe online. Okay, lots of us will use mobile devices or laptops and things, and we might be using them for messaging friends, we might be playing games, but we might be communicating with other people on those games and apps. You might be using them for going on the internet, finding stuff out, looking at YouTube, for example, all that stuff that you enjoy doing. But it's really important that we can use those things safely, because the internet can be a difficult place, and it's something that we have to really consider. First thing I want you to remember in that is about never ever giving out your personal information. It's a good idea to use a kind of not a real name, for example. You might just use kind of a bit of a nickname that's kind of a handle that you use when you're online. You should never give out your address. And you shouldn't really even say the school you go to. What you're trying to do is make sure that people can't find you easily. So keep yourselves safe online. Never give out your personal information. We also know that sometimes when you look at stuff on the internet, you might see something that makes you feel upset or makes you feel worried. Sometimes things pop up that we weren't expecting, and that might make you feel upset or worried. You might, if you've got phones and things, you might receive a message or see something on your phone that really bothers you and makes you feel uncomfortable and that you really don't like. The important message I want you to take from that is that you must tell an adult, a safe adult that you trust, every time that those things happen. On websites, if something happens that you don't like or you don't think is right, there's often report tabs that you can click on. But if something comes through to your phone or your device, don't kind of delete it straight away. Just show your grown-up to make sure that they can see it and that they can help you and tell you what to do next. But it's so important that you don't keep things a secret. always talk to an adult that you can trust every time. So anything that happens in terms of phone messages or anything that you see online that makes you feel really uncomfortable, tell an adult, okay? Because they can help you out with those things. So we've covered then kind of keeping ourselves safe on a personal level, especially when we're out and about. We talked about keeping ourselves safe when we're using the internet and when we're using kind of mobile devices and phones and things. We also then, at the moment, in our kind of world that we're living in at the moment, need to give consideration to how we can kind of keep ourselves safe in terms of our health and our well-being. Lots of you will be aware that at the moment the world is talking a lot about COVID-19, about a really nasty flu illness that's been going around and has really affected everything that we do across the world at the moment. And you'll be aware of that because it's had an impact on your life in terms of not being at school for a while, going back into last term, although that feels quite a long time ago now. But there are lots of ways we need to work together in this as well to keep ourselves safe and to keep our families safe. In particular, we need to think about our hands. So you noticed at the start of the assembly, there I was with my antibac, making sure that my hands were sanitised, and that I've done that often. So far more often than I would normally have washed my hands perhaps, making sure we're sanitising a lot. The other thing is we need to catch our sniffs and our sneezes in tissues. And as soon as we've done that, it needs to go in the tissue bin. You know, the little small ones that have got a lid on in your classrooms. We also make sure that our hands, we keep them to ourselves, that we're not using them to touch other people, that we're not touching other people's stuff and sharing things. That way, any germs that might be lingering on our hands, we're not spreading them around with other people. So that's really important. That's kind of keeping ourselves safe in that way. We're having to be really responsible and independent as well around school in order to keep ourselves safe. We're having to do a lot more for ourselves than perhaps we would have normally have done. So we need to keep up that responsibility bit, but not just in school. We need to be responsible with the way that we behave, both in school with all of those things that we talked about, hand washing and catching your sneezes and not touching other people's stuff. But we also need to make sure that we are keeping ourselves safe and thinking about keeping others safe in the way that we behave when we're outside of school too. Now, some of you older ones might get to go out a bit on your own. You might go to the park, for example, on your own, or kind of go out the front of Stukeley Meadows there and play football or play games with your friends and things like that. But you do need to remember that keeping your distance from one another is so important at the moment, okay? You've got to think about space. That's the message that the government are giving us at the moment. Think about space. So make sure that you're not all crammed together and kind of hugging each other and all close together, even when you're outside of school as well as in school. It's really important to keep yourselves safe, but also to keep your families safe. You should also remember that you shouldn't be in groups of more than 6. You might have heard Boris Johnson talk about something called the rule of 6. Now, you know that in Stukeley, we like Stukeley 6s. Well, Boris Johnson has borrowed our Stukeley 6 idea and gone for this rule of 6. And that basically means that you shouldn't be hanging about in groups of more than 6 people. Okay, so do think about that, those of you that are out and about. It's all part of our working together, not only as a community of people inside school, but also a community that goes beyond our school. And it's all of our families are included in that as well. So we've all got to work together. So safety is a really big thing. It's really important to us. So you need to think about your personal safety, about crossing roads safely, about not talking to people that we don't know when we're out and about making sure who our trusted adults are so we know who to look for if we were lost or troubled. We've talked a little bit also about keeping ourselves safe online. Really important, remember, don't give out any personal information. Talk to people if you find things online that are upsetting to you. And then lastly, keeping ourselves COVID safe. So making sure that we're washing our hands and keeping our hands clean, and that we're behaving in sensible ways and we're keeping to small numbers and also keeping our distance. So those are the things we want you to take away from this assembly about collaboration, but also in particular about keeping ourselves safe. So I hope that you have listened to that really carefully. I know there's a lot of information in there. and perhaps things you can talk about further as a class. So everybody, have a really great rest of your week, and remember everyone, keep safe and see you next time.
We're Koops and the Gang, come on! Come on! I'll do it, yeah, hang on, right.
Go, Mrs. Nightingale.
Desmond has a barrow in the marketplace. Molly is the singer in the band. Desmond says to Molly, girl, I like your face. And Molly says this as she takes him by the hand. Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on. Oh, la, la, how the life goes on. Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on. Oh, la, la, how the life goes on. Desmond takes a trolley to the jeweller's store, buys a 20-carat golden ring, takes it back to Molly waiting at the door, and as he gives it to her she begins to sing. Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on. Oh, la, la, how the life goes on. Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on. Oh, la, la, how the life goes on. In a couple of years they have built a home sweet home, with a couple of kids running in the yard of Desmond and Molly Jones. Happy ever after in the marketplace, Desmond lets the children lend a hand. Molly stays at home and does a pretty face, and in the evening she just sings it with the band. Come on! Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on. Oh, la, la, how the life goes on. And again. Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on. Oh, la, la, how the life goes on. Couple of years. In a couple of years they have built a home sweet home, with a couple of kids running in the yard of Desmond and Molly Jones. Happy ever after in the marketplace, Molly lets the children lend a hand. Desmond stays at home and does his pretty face, and in the evening she's a singer with the band. Come on! Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on. Oh, la, la, how the life goes on. Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on. Oh, la, la, how the life goes on. And if you want some fun, sing oh, bloody blada. Oh, great work, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Stevens, for some really important safety messages there. Now, before the most important 60 seconds, I've got some shout outs. The first one is for Lily G. In year 5, it's her birthday today. Happy birthday, Lily. Hope you're having and will have a great day. I've also got a shout out for the Garcias, the Barons, the Georges and the Sievers, who all got the challenge correct from last Friday's assembly. The anagram that I'd hidden was the word splendid, and I'd hidden it like as a little flash at the start of the assembly. But the winner of the challenge is the Gilbert family, and they've got William in foundation stage because they were the first ones to find it and send it to me. So a prize is going home with William today. Now we're going to have some shout outs for the Oakleaf Bookshop. Now, next week, we're relaunching the Oakleaf Bookshop. We're going to start it up again with massive celebrations and enthusiasm. And to get us warmed up for that and to get us excited for that, we're going to have a brand new shout out feature called the Oakleaf Bookshop. Here we go. Okay, it needs a little song, I know that, but for now we're just going to build up excitement for the Oakleaf Bookshop. Now remember, it sells books, new and old. It sells bits, stationery, little toys, all that kind of nonsense. And it also sells t-shirts. Oh yes, it does. So let's start getting excited for next week's launch. First thing today, we've got annuals in. We've got these annuals. Yeah, they're all £4 each. That's just some of the great books that we've got. I'll give you more shout outs tomorrow. The most important 60 seconds are coming up now. The most important 60 seconds are coming up now. Right, we're in the middle of safety week. Let's think about the 6 things we can do if we don't feel safe. We can talk to staff, teachers and people we know in school. We can talk to other adults that we know and pass on things to them. We can definitely talk to family. Not always maybe, but most of the time. We can use email. Your families can get in touch with me or with the teachers. You can use the talk box if you really don't want to say anything out loud. And you can also talk to your friends. That's really important. What has Mrs. Stevens talked about today? She's talked about being safe online and passing on anything you're worried about. She's also talked about when you're with your friends and when you're arranging to meet or you're meeting family somewhere and you might be on your own, stick to the rules that they give you. That's really important. And the last thing, very, very important, at the moment, we've got rules around social distancing and rules around being in groups. Please stick to them and keep safe.